welcome to the Abstract Machine podcast. The episode for today, What if God is a vending machine? And today we have Steven Barbone, Professor Emeritus of Philosophy at San Diego State University, whose research focuses primarily on early modern philosophy, metaphysics and ethics of Baruch Spinoza. A short list of his notable publications include What is an Individual for Spinoza? Spinoza and the Problem of Suicide, Spinoza and Necessary Existence, and not just unmitigated and seemingly unmotivated disaster. What did Spinoza mean by sentimos esperimur que nos externos esse? Short little title there. His engagement with Spinoza's philosophy demonstrates both historical precision and philosophical creativity, situating him as a contemporary interpreter of the Spinozist tradition of eminence, reason, and joy. Welcome to the Abstract Machine podcast, Professor Barbone, where we are friends of Deleuze, Spinoza, and Nietzsche.
Thank you for inviting me to chat with you today.
My pleasure. So the first question I'm going to ask you is going to be just a fun little question. So if there were any two thinkers, any historical time frame that you could put into a conversation or debate with Spinoza, who would they be and what would they debate?
Very good question. One person to talk with Spinoza would have to be anybody alive today. It doesn't have to be a great thinker, a philosopher, or a scientist. It could even be a small child. I think it would be so interesting to see a giant of the 17th century get to talk to one of our contemporaries who can use a cell phone and watch video games and get news from all around the world in an instant. And I think it would be marvelous to get Spinoza's thoughts on how this is happening and how we've got there.
Okay, so we're let's get into the conversation, and I'm gonna give one quote here. I'm taking a quote from one of your podcast appearances, one of the many that you have. So, you were a guest in a podcast, and forgive me for not knowing the name of the podcast, but the episode was on Pirsig, and I'm gonna take a quote just to make you feel more comfortable. So the quote says, you say, quote, Pirsig makes the point that philosophy has been under delusion that philosophy can answer all the questions. And Pirsig points out that this is like the emperor has no clothes. No, philosophy cannot answer all the questions, end quote. That being said, let's try to answer some questions about Spinoza and eternity, shall we?
Sure.
That episode was... If there's somebody out there listening and you guys are interested in knowing who Pirsig, what's his first name? I don't even know his first name. I'm going to say it's Robert.
Robert.
Yeah. And the book that he wrote that you...
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He has another book, Lolita, and a third. Name escaping me right now.
One of the... I haven't finished that episode, but one of the takeaways I had was one, Pirsig sounds like an interesting guy.
If you get the book because you want to learn how to take apart and put together your motorcycle, it's not going to be a very practical manual.
Do not look for philosophers to teach you how to fix motorcycles.
But yet the book is an excellent manual about how to do anything. One thing that a person can do well is maintain a motorcycle. It is how you go about doing it, not what you are doing.
If that's not a great pitch for the book, to read the book, I don't know what is. I would love to read it at some point.
The podcast where you heard that quote was done for the 50th anniversary of that book.
Mm.
So it's still in print. It's still around.
Very cool. Okay, so as I mentioned before, you wrote a paper with an incredibly concise and catchy title. The title is Not Just an Unmitigated and Seemingly Unmotivated Disaster. What could Spinoza mean by sentimos esperimur que nos externos esse? And I do not speak Latin, so if I mispronounced any of that, please correct me. So first of all, the question is, what's the inside joke with the title here? Can you let us in?
Oh, the inside joke, the unmitigated and seemingly unmotivated disaster, is a direct quote from Jonathan Bennett's book, A Study of Spinoza's Ethics. Bennett, for better or worse, helped Spinoza get more attention, become more interesting to academics when Bennett first wrote his book. He was among the first to do a hardcore, we'll say, analytic approach to looking through Spinoza. Bennett gets a lot of Spinoza right, but I think he gets a lot of it wrong, and I think Bennett is very quick to criticize what he thinks are mistakes. And part 5 of Spinoza's book, Ethics, Bennett, among other things, calls it an unmitigated and seemingly unmotivated disaster.
And the part sentimos esperimur que nos aternos esse, do you pronounce it more or less? Is that how you would pronounce it?
There are very few people, native Latin speakers, left, so we can't know for sure how Latin speakers might say these words. This is a line from Spinoza's Ethics. He wrote in Latin and Dutch.
And that means we feel eternity. I'm just guessing here.
It means, if I'm going to do just the plainest translation, we feel and we experience ourselves to be eternal.
Perfect. So why don't we set up the background for Spinoza here? Why don't we start with what was the most dominant view on the relation between the mind and the body in Spinoza's time? And how does Spinoza, how does his view differ or agree with that dominant view at the time?
The most dominant view would have been, at his time, would have been the Aristotelian scholastic view. Minds or souls and bodies together make up one substance. God, by a miracle, at the time of death, would be able to separate the subsistent soul from the body so that the subsistent soul could remain, the body could corrupt. That was the most dominant view. Just prior to Spinoza, Descartes comes along and says, oh, no, it's different now. Minds and bodies are completely distinct substances. And they can be separated, and God indeed does separate them. They are completely separate. Descartes may have gone too far, because if they are completely separate substances, this makes interaction between them impossible. And so today we have the hard problem of consciousness. How can my immaterial mind direct my very material body? How do things that occur to my body, how can the mind, which is supposed to be immaterial, know about these things? Descartes did a lot to advance contemporary science and thought, but there was still then this mind-body divide.
Right.
Spinoza, among many other of his contemporaries, worked to try to figure out how to overcome that divide. Spinoza's solution, in a quick nutshell, is there's no divide. Minds and bodies are exactly the same thing. It's just, we'll say, a point of view.
And this is the view that gets categorized in the Spinoza's scholarship as parallelism. Is that correct?
Yes. So Spinoza, I'll use another fancy word, is a monist, which refers that to the point that there is one substance and one only. It's we don't have to worry whether it's a mental substance or a physical substance. Under Spinoza's view, it's both. The parallelism, not a word Spinoza ever used, a word that Leibniz applied to Spinoza's philosophy, is the thought that whatever is going on with the mind, with mental things, ideas, thoughts, also, likewise, the same, but in a physical way, is going on with the body. So not two things are happening, one thing is happening. It can be described as mental, it can be described as physical.
I was under the impression that parallelism was somewhat of a modern word, but I'm surprised to know that it goes back to Leibniz himself. Let's see here. So let's talk about the article. What's the main problem you want to resolve in this article, or what's the main problem you see?
A big problem with Spinoza's ethics is that he spends so much time, there are 5 parts to it, in part 2 especially is pretty much dedicated to this discussion of how the mind and body are really one thing, not 2 separate things.
Monism that we just mentioned, or parallelism?
That reality is monist-based, and that our minds, our bodies are identical, just understood or perceived in different ways. So that's not a problem. Then he gets to part 5, which Jonathan Bennett, we named him already, says is just a complete disaster. Because in part 5, now Spinoza suddenly says, oh yeah, by the way, the mind is eternal after the body is destroyed. And people should, if they've been paying attention, should say, wait, time out, there's got to be a mistake. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And so, again, people like Bennett are going to say, Spinoza must have been smoking something. Other commentators who are more kind will say, well, Spinoza wrote this toward the end of his life. He knew he was dying. Perhaps he was looking for some kind of way to soften his impending death. That's just not true, though. The ethics were completed some years before Spinoza died. He had circulated copies among friends. He had even brought it to a publisher. And though the printer was ready to print it, Spinoza yelled, hey, stop the presses. He was very upset with the reaction of his other book, the Theological Political Treatise. So, no, this wasn't a matter of, I'm dying, I gotta...
He wrote it in his deathbed, basically.
Not kind of a deathbed delirium.
Right. So before we ask the question of because I'm not sure if the ethics were they published, because I know he published some works anonymously. Were the ethics published under his name? The question I'm trying to get at is if when they received this work, the ethics, did people ask him directly? Did they have a chance to ask him directly? Hey, Spinoza, what about part 5? What about the eternity of the mind without the body?
Yeah, the ethics is not published in his lifetime. That he had planned to publish it, but again stopped the presses.
Got it.
Drafts were circulated. At Spinoza's death, his friends went into his desk and removed all his writing. Among the writings they removed were his letters to and from friends. Many of those letters address questions about things he says in the ethics, like, hey, but what about this? Or what do you mean by that? And Spinoza gives a reply. Not all the letters were saved. Many were destroyed because many of his friends feared, rightly, that association with Spinoza could be detrimental to them.
Persecution. Yeah.
And so there may have been letters no, I don't think of myself as eternal or as existing forever, because you cannot think of not existing.
Right. In other words, what you're saying is what we cannot do is think of our death, or
I can think of my death, but I can't think of my not existing.
right. That's an interesting way of looking at it.
You will always be there at that. You always put yourself into that time, into that place when you are imagining, oh, what about when dinosaurs roamed the earth? What would it be like if I were there? Aha, I were there. Okay, I'm not going to put myself there.
Right.
I'm just imagining what it was like, but you're there if it's getting imagined by you.
Right. And I think that this is a problem that also comes up with Heidegger and being towards death.
Except maybe Heidegger should have done better.
Well, I remember that was one of the claims that this was either Derrida or Professor Otterton said, well, it seems like Heidegger is wrestling with the problem of not being able to show like that we die. And somebody made that point of like, it almost seems like there's a problem of not being able to die or not being able to show that we die. Like we feel as if we die, but we cannot prove it.
Yeah, Heidegger might have used the word being through death.
You were saying that would have been a better word to use?
I think off the top of my head, without giving it thought, yeah, I'll go with that right now.
Because that would explain that.
If it's being toward death, it kind of implies, yep, I'm going to die, that's it, done. But I can't believe that's what Heidegger is asking us, how Heidegger is asking us to conceive of ourselves.
Well, I think actually that's the way he thinks about it, being towards death. I think that's why he calls it being towards death, is towards the event, and that's why in the passage in Beginning Time he says about the actual event of death, or even the after the event of death. There's nothing we can say. All we can say is our relationship towards that event, if you will, towards the point of death, finality, finitude. And so for Spinoza, the free man thinks least of death. Heidegger almost flips that on its head, and he says it's actually the opposite. The person that thinks most of death is the free man, because for Heidegger, there's an association between death, or being towards death anyway, and this sense of supreme lucidity. Levinas calls it the sense of supreme lucidity. But for Heidegger, that authentic relationship towards the fact that we're going to die actually gives us a sense of freedom. And Spinoza would say, no, why bother?
I don't think it's no, why bother? Spinoza, I think, would call anyone a fool if that person believed, oh, by the way, I'm not going to die. No, you're gonna. We have good inductive evidence to support that. So I don't think Spinoza is making the claim, don't worry, be happy, because life is going to go on. Perhaps like this supreme lucidity, I can acknowledge that in Spinoza's world of cause and effect, the body will be destroyed. That is not a matter of dread or woe. That's just how it goes. But you know what? That's not how it is right now. Isn't that great?
Right.
So I don't want to say, let's distill it down to make hay while the sun shines, but hey, the laws of the universe have been such that I am here. Yay.
Who's the one philosopher it might be a Stoic philosopher who says, "Where I am, death is not, and where death is, I'm not." Something like that.
Yeah, I believe that is attributed to one of the early Stoics, and I am unable to
Yeah,
name.
same.
But I want to say something about this free person who thinks least of death.
Mm-hmm.
This free person is somebody who is not bothered by harmful, limiting emotions. The free person is the person who sees herself, understands himself as part of the universe, part of God, and is very content with the come and go of it all. So I'm not bothered that I'm going to die, and because that's just a fact about things, I don't really dwell on it. I don't think about it. I'm living now. I'm not living in the shadow of tomorrow.
Right. And this is an interpretation. This is a common Spinoza interpretation. It's not just a California interpretation.
I think this is a common enough Spinoza interpretation about the free person who doesn't think of death.
That's great. But it still fits with the California, the California vibe a little bit.
Hey, we're evolved.
We are, as we should. Well, why... So why don't we address? So it seems like we've addressed one of the problems that you see with the scholarship and the misinterpretations of Spinoza. We agree that you cannot get Spinoza to say that we know that we are eternal. The best we can do, or what we can do, is to say Spinoza says that we feel we are eternal. But so if you look back at, in what sense? So if you look back at Proposition 23, where he says the human mind cannot be absolutely destroyed along with the body, but something of it remains, which is eternal. What is it that remains, and in what shape does this eternity of the mind remains after particular bodies, after modes of substance, they've dissipated? In what shape, or what is it that endures after that destruction, the dissipation of particular body arrangements?
I think a good response is, this is not a very interesting question, and the answer is equally not interesting. But too late. The horse is out of the barn. Let's ignore the issue of the mind. Let's just pretend, for the sake of argument, that the materialist view of reality is correct. And so
just to disclose my cards, I'm somewhat of a materialist myself. Yes.
And if this materialist view is correct, then more or less that says all there is matter, and it just takes up different arrangements. We can think of that the world is built up of atoms or molecules, or maybe the atoms have subatomic parts, and those have subatomic parts, but there's a certain number of them, that's how many there are. And they just make up different arrangements. When I am dead, the molecules that make up my body will not cease to exist. Or maybe some of the molecules will be dissolved into atoms or quarks or whatever comes below that. But it will still be there.
Right. Assuming the one of the assumptions or one of the axioms of physics, the conservation of energy, right? You cannot destroy it.
Assuming that.
Yep.
Now, even if that's not true, if I'm a materialist, something is, those physical particles are going to remain in existence in some way, maybe transformed into energy. I don't understand physics. Mm-hmm. But they will still exist. They do not go away.
Yep.
So in a way that's not even metaphorical, a way that is quite literal, I can say, maybe as Kant said, we are all stardust. My body in ways is immortal because the molecules, quarks, atoms that make it up have always been, will always be.
Okay.
Now we can go to the problem of the mind. A simple attack on this proposition for Spinoza is to say, well, remember that parallelism stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we can believe that somehow the body, in some way, parts, something of it remains as immortal, then likewise we can say this of the mind. A common interpretation of this for Spinoza is that God has an idea that is me, and God's ideas will remain forever. So the idea that God has about me is eternal. This is a very uninteresting promise of any kind of personal immortality. If enough people could live long enough, if I were famous enough, then somebody will always have an idea about me, and that could be true, but I really shouldn't care.
Right. So let's suppose that you're talking to a materialist who also happens to be an atheist, leaning anyway, and maybe a finitist also. Somebody who has issues with eternity or infinity. How do you get that to make sense to this person? How do you begin to try to persuade this person that there is for every idea that there has ever existed, it still exists somewhere in God's mind?
Well, if this person's an atheist, I can't convince this person of that.
Yeah.
So
you walk out of the room.
But if this person is a materialist, all I need to do is to say, it doesn't matter when the matter first came about. It doesn't matter that all matter will go out of existence. But as long as there is matter, some of it is, or was, or will be, something that makes or made up or will make up me.
Right. And I guess what I'm asking is like similar to like the matter, similar to like material stuff. Material stuff dissipates. Like we don't lose matter. We don't lose energy, right? That's conservation of energy. It doesn't go away. It just gets transfigured. It just gets permuted into different shapes, from a microphone into a person, whatever. Conservation of energy. But there are no remains. There's no need to say, well, because there was a dinosaur at some point that no longer exists. There's no need to say, well, it still exists in God's mind because God's creations are infinite. Is that correct? What I'm trying to get at is there seems to be a claim about if there was once an idea, that idea is eternal because it's in God's mind. But you cannot make the same claim about matter configurations, can you?
If the matter configurations are also ideas, and by parallelism they are, then yes, I can.
But you can have the memory of an idea without the matter anymore.
I can have the memory of the apple I ate for lunch. Certainly that apple no longer exists as that apple.
Mm-hmm.
The memory I have does exist. I, maybe others would, but I do not confuse my memory of the apple with that physical apple.
Right.
There is a physical, under Spinoza's view, some physical entity that is parallel to my memory or my idea of the apple. Today, a person could easily say, oh, well, that's just brain state number 5. Or that's this hormone going, or some chemical in your bloodstream right now.
Right. Well, I have to say, even after, so I we had a seminar on Spinoza on the ethics with Professor Barbone, and it was excellent. I loved it. And I have to say, to this day, I still struggle with that. I still struggle with that that aspect of it. It appears to me on the spot. I'm not going to be able to resolve it, but it just appears to me a little bit of somewhat of an asymmetry between, kind of like the imprint of mind and matter. But well, for that, those are the reasons why you read the text. Those are the reasons why you read philosophy.
This brings up a great point, another different criticism of Spinoza, where you claim, correctly, I think, you have a hard time matching up a physical object with ideas about it or that are of it. And Spinoza's own text makes it worse because he allows for there to be ideas of ideas and ideas of ideas of ideas. We don't talk about bodies of bodies or bodies of bodies of bodies or extensions of extension or any talk like that. So it does seem to populate the universe with an infinite number, infinitely more ideas than bodies, and the parallelism can't work under that view.
Basically, what you're saying is that there cannot be a one-to-one correspondence between the ideas of ideas of ideas and bodies.
It seems like we're going to run out of bodies pretty soon.
Right.
Now, maybe just in Spinoza's lifetime, we get Newton and Leibniz, who developed the infinitesimal calculus, and maybe by some kind of math magic, we can say, oh, yeah, see, really, it doesn't matter. But that's beyond what I can do.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it sounds like maybe you can phrase it in terms of set theory and sets within sets. And but, that was not to be developed for another 200 years, something like 100 years, right around there.
I believe that is true. I don't know when set theory got instantiated.
Set theory, I want to say 1850, right around there.
Yeah, so we can forgive Spinoza for not knowing about that.
Oh, yeah, and even set theory, the founder, who was known as the founder of set theory, his name is Georg Cantor, German mathematician, and also somewhat of a little bit of a mysticist. He was influenced by the Kabbalah, and so the first formulations of set theory, one of the big breakthroughs was, or contributions to mathematics was that there were two things. There were different sizes of infinities, and they could contain infinity within a completed set. And to the mathematical community, the majority of the mathematical community, this was absolute heresy.
Spinoza would not be able to... he'd have to see the numbers. Spinoza's view of infinity would be that you can't have one infinity bigger than another.
You cannot.
He explicitly addresses this in a letter to a friend.
You cannot have an infinity being bigger than another.
According to Spinoza.
According to Spinoza.
Before Cantor, almost every reasonable person would have agreed.
Right. And really briefly, what's his reason for saying that it cannot be? I mean, it totally makes sense at the time. And this is why Cantor lost his mind, because everybody in the mathematical community, all the best mathematicians, German mathematicians of the time, said, this guy is a charlatan. This guy needs to be expelled. And he struggled with that mentally. So it was not well accepted, and definitely not right away.
No, I am unable to conceive, though I can say the words, that if I have an infinite line, that there is, and it's measured in feet, that line has 12 times the infinite number of inches. That I can say those words, and they kind of make sense, but I'm just babbling.
Right. I will say that the common person, I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but most people even to mathematicians, I was an undergrad mathematics student, and the first time that we encountered those proofs of the different sizes of infinities, they never sit well. They never sit well. They're just completely counterintuitive. They never sit well, but at some point we all accept it because set theory has become kind of like one of the logical foundations for mathematics. But they never seem commonsensical.
No, and it could be, I know we're veering off Spinoza, but it could be that next century we may even be mocked for our current beliefs, or what we know certainly to be true about infinity. We have seen this time and time again throughout the history of science, throughout the history of philosophy. Something that everybody knows turns out to be, well, really, we didn't know.
True. Although I will say that as far as mathematics, I don't think we will go backwards on infinity. It seems like it's almost like we're accelerating that process in a similar way in which at some point we had the one single geometry point of view, and everything geometrical up to the 19th century was basically Euclidean geometry. But there was one postulate, one assumption that just made everybody uneasy. And so they try to prove this postulate, and eventually they realized they couldn't. So they created a split within mathematics and geometry, and people came around the idea that Euclidean geometry was one of perhaps a multiplicity of different geometries. And so again, it was revolutionary, so it was not taken well at first, but eventually it got accepted. It seems something similar is happening within mathematics itself. People are starting to consider different axioms that give you different mathematics. So it seems like we're moving in the direction in mathematics where we could have almost an infinity of different types of mathematics that are grounded on different logical principles. But that's beyond the scope of this conversation. So why don't we get back to Spinoza, something grounded in reality. So you know that these days with computers, people have, I call it a fantasy that, you know, we could become, that we can turn our consciousness into this software that we can just upload into a machine, and somehow things are going to work out. You know, like there are people that often say like, oh yeah, I cannot wait until I can upload my consciousness into a computer. And in this fantasy, everything's going to play out well. You're not going to need a job. You're going to be infinite. You don't have to worry about maintaining the hardware, the computer, or you don't have to worry about paying for the cloud space. You don't have to worry about the energy footprint that your consciousness is taking up. Somehow, just this digital consciousness and what I call a fantasy, this digital consciousness fantasy is just completely detached from matter, from bodies, from extensions. Do you see a possibility where that can be a reality at some point in the future?
If, like current science fiction movies or books or stories have, people can put a consciousness into a computer or program of some sort. And sure, that can work. That happens all the time, whatever. If that were to happen, we haven't overcome Spinoza's system, because this consciousness or this mind would still be able to be understood, perceived, or interacted with as a body. So even if this consciousness or mind were in the cloud, and I don't know what that really means.
I don't either.
But if it were, there is still going to be some physical correlate that is that mind. So that if we were to change these bits we would be changing that mind.
Right.
I don't see that in Spinoza's philosophy that it is required that human minds must have human bodies. Although if they were not human bodies, perhaps we would not really claim them to be human minds anymore. Still minds, but maybe not human ones.
So if there's no requirement that human minds need to have human bodies, then some people fantasize and think, well, yeah, well, there you go. We could, in principle, have minds, human minds, and computer bodies. So, if we even take that further, we could sandwich consciousnesses inside of one computer.
If we could take that further, we might be able to say, well, why does it have to be a computer? We could put different minds in the same human body. But we've been playing with this even before computers.
Have we?
So that children, even little kids, before the last century, could tell you when the wicked witch turns the prince into a frog. Mm-hmm. It's not a human. Or that frog is not a human. But who is the frog? And it's the prince.
Right.
So there is a mind, but the body is different. Now, today, I think very few who think about it would say, yeah, that could really happen. We might say, somehow that frog gets a different mind.
Right.
But it's not going to be a human mind anymore. It's going to be some kind of frog mind. Maybe this is why that we can't know what it's like to be a bat, because we don't have bat bodies.
Right. So it seems like in principle, that idea, the digital consciousness idea, could be, from Spinoza's perspective, it seems like it's plausible.
That a mind could be put into a computer.
Given that there is a body that's attached to the consciousness, or consciousness is plural.
Yeah, though I'm not sure that we would any longer be able to say it's a human mind. It would be that computer mind.
Is there, are there openings in Spinoza's philosophy for transhumanism, I guess?
Limited. You can ship of Theseus this. So Spinoza, in part 2 of the Ethics, in Proposition 13, details what are the conditions needed to have or to remain the same individual, we can say human. So, yes, we grow, we shrink, we diminish, we change motion, we change rest. I can lose parts. I can become an amputee, and people would still agree, yeah, that's still Steve. I would still think of myself as Steve. I can't lose my head and still be me, at least not right now. I can't lose my heart and still be me.
So when people say I'm losing my head, they don't quite literally mean it.
They cannot literally mean it, unless
they're still the same person.
Unless they are expected to be executed. And yeah, grammatically, yeah. I am losing my head tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that I will exist after tomorrow.
Right. Correct. That's great. Well, it sounds to me like that could be the topic for a whole another conversation, Spinoza and identity.
I think Spinoza has quite a bit to say about identity, not just in terms of me, my personal identity, because I believe that discussion of identity in Spinoza can be expanded to what makes the United States be the United States? What makes, say, the American people be the American people, or the football team? Is it the same football team that we had last year? Deleuze's sin, if there is a sin, is that while he cherishes Spinoza and might complement him. And though Deleuze develops his philosophy using Spinozistic principles and ideas, he's not very quick to admit that. Not very quick, I think, to say, and from Spinoza we get this idea, here's how I'm going to develop it. And from Spinoza we have this, and here's what we can do with it now.
Okay. That's a fair charge. Which, I would not expect you to know, but he does say that quite often. I think one of his most clear examples of that is the body with no. I'm sure you have something to say about the body without organs, but
Yeah.
the one of his most important concepts of Deleuze is the plane of immanence, which is just another word that Deleuze coined for substance, the one substance. Deleuze calls it the plane of immanence. Basically, what I'm saying is he just changes the word from God, because I don't get the sense that I don't have a clear idea if Deleuze was an atheist, but I do get the sense that he was some form of atheist. But it seems to me, at least, he changes the name from Spinoza's God, from God to the plane of immanence. That it seems to me that's all he does. He just calls it plane of immanence, which is, I don't think it's too much of a stretch. But so in that case, so if you have any glaring issues with, or I guess I should say bigger issues with Deleuze's engagement with Spinoza, what would that be?
I won't name one. I'm going to plead ignorance. And I don't wish to make, on purpose, false claims. I wish to avoid making false claims.
Fair. We love that. We love honesty. And, if I were to speculate, it would probably have something to do with Deleuze's own philosophy. He's not what we call a critical, close reader. Although I think he claims to be a close reader of Spinoza. Like, he doesn't stay close to the... he takes very big hermeneutic liberties. And I think he does the same with Spinoza, even though he says that he respects him the most. But so I think that would be one of my assumptions, one of my guesses as to why the relationship is not reciprocal between Deleuze and Spinoza. And another one, a glaring one, it's Deleuze's style. It's to most people, it's moronic. Some people find it so off-putting. And I do not blame them. There is a lot to get through in order to see if there's some substance there. So I understand.
My few forays into Deleuze might support. Maybe not moronic, but come on, man, get to the point.
Complete opposite of Spinoza. I mean, Spinoza in the Ethics is just concise, very concrete, very systematic, and Deleuze is like, you cannot say any of that about him. That's the Nietzschean side, I guess. That's the Dionysian Nietzschean influence in Deleuze. But anyway, okay, great. So yeah, why don't we wrap this up with a few quick rapid fire type of questions.
Do I get to ask you, or you're going to ask me?
We can do both if you like. But in case you don't have any prepared, I have a couple here.
Yeah, I'll ask you one.
Okay.
That deals with this problem of mind eternity.
Okay.
Assuming you believe the Pythagorean theorem is true,
Mm-hmm.
what happens to that idea when you die?
What happens to that idea when I die? Okay, great.
Does the Pythagorean theorem remain true even when you die, even when humanity is erased?
Right. Well, I think this is similar to the Platonist view of mathematics, right? Like these truths about mathematics, they're there, but some of them we found and some of them we haven't found yet. Pythagorean theorem is one of them. We found it. It's done. Like, it's eternal. So I think that's what you want me to say. However, the pragmatic side of me would say, no. I'm not a Platonist. My philosophy of mathematics is not Platonist. I'm more somewhere of a pragmatic with mathematics, pragmatist. So no, I think that they don't remain. Well, okay. So I think we have to go a little bit onto the philosophy of mathematics. I think that there's an element of logicism in which some things we agree that they are true, but they're almost like analytic propositions from Kant, right? Like we say, okay, we agree logically speaking. If you have this set of assumptions, axioms, whatever, we can agree that this is true. But it doesn't have to be true across. Like it doesn't have to be eternally true. Like, for example, geometry, Euclidean geometry is not the only one geometry. There can be different geometries. So not all the claims about Euclidean geometry have to be true forever.
And they do, as long as we're using Euclidean geometry.
Right. So I guess maybe to try to use Wittgenstein, which I don't know that well, but to kind of help ask him to help me to bail me out, I would say, well, we're playing language games, and as long as we play language games, okay, yeah, we can agree that 1 + 1 = 2, but it doesn't. There is no necessity.
So as long as there's that language,
right? And so I mean, we could lose that language, right?
Mm-hmm. But
and there's no guarantee that we can regain that language in the future. I mean, I think that the hope is, or the assumption is, no, like we will like I think Kant would say that, like we will rediscover that. If it's rational, like we will rediscover the language game. I think my pragmatic side would be to say, well, no, if we lose it, we might never rediscover it.
Might not. But I think for our discussion with Spinoza, because he has God kind of in the background.
Right.
Not
a little bit.
Not separate from.
Right.
But if this idea is true once, it's always true, eternally true. And so your current true idea about the Pythagorean theorem, given the limits of Euclidean space,
right,
will always remain true.
Right. And I guess, and that's the thing that I was pointing out, that is what it seems to me like it's an asymmetry that I'm struggling with. Because you wouldn't be able to claim the same thing about, say, Pythagoras. Let's assume that he was the author of the Pythagorean theorem, which there is controversy. Yeah. But let's assume that he was the author of it. The Pythagorean theorem is eternal, or it's a mind in God, right? But we cannot say that Pythagoras himself is eternal. His body is not eternal.
Certainly the body is not eternal.
So that's what seems to me like a little bit of an asymmetry between the body and the mind.
The view I'm playing with, the true ideas Pythagoras had, remain true.
Sure.
These ideas were parts of his mind.
Right.
So as parts of his mind, these ideas remain. We can say, grammatically, and so some of Pythagoras' mind remains, despite that his body has been destroyed. In an uninteresting way, parts or all of Pythagoras' body remain. Just different configurations altogether.
Right. And I think still the challenge, the materialist challenge, or the Marxist materialist challenge would be to say, like, I mean, that logic only works because we're assuming that we're still going to have a civilization that has preserved the knowledge that we have accumulated up to this point. Mm. But what if civilization just gets reset to zero? Why do we assume that we're going to rediscover the same Pythagorean theorems, all the same philosophies?
Under Spinoza's system, even when the sun has supernovaed, and we'll say humans have not left the solar system. So there are no humans. We're not going to rediscover anything because there's not going to be an us to do anything.
Right.
The Pythagorean theorem in Spinoza's system will still remain in the mind of God. And insofar as that was an idea in Pythagoras' mind, an idea in your mind, something of your mind remains.
Right, but how do you convince a materialist that makes sense?
Oh, I have to convince the materialist. All right, materialist, after the sun supernovas and wipes out the solar system,
right.
This does not mean the matter is annihilated. Something of your body is going to become some new part of some new constellation someplace.
Right, but we're going to lose that Pythagorean theorem. Wait, let's assume that we'll never rediscover it again.
That it's never rediscovered. In this thought experiment, the Pythagorean theorem is, we'll say, it's not a simple idea, but we'll say it's a simple idea, equivalent to a molecule, a physical molecule. So the physical molecule that is somehow the correlate of the simple idea remains. And so because you're a materialist, I can't say in God's mind. In the universe, it still remains.
Right.
Although, if we're a materialist, we can't be talking about ideas of the Pythagorean theorem to begin with. So,
well, I was going to say that's why an idealist and a materialist cannot be friends, right?
Oh, they can be friends.
Right. They just cannot agree over philosophical conversations between idealism and materialism. Unless you are, who's that guy? Who's a German guy who claims to have united both idealists? Well, okay, besides Spinoza. Who's that other crazy German guy?
You might mean Leibniz. Leibniz has not united minds and bodies. He agrees with Descartes. They are forever separate substances.
I guess I was thinking one of your friends, one of your biggest influences, German philosopher from the 19th century.
You are probably teasing me, and you want me to go with.
And you're denying me the answer because you know who I'm talking about.
You are probably referring to Friedrich Nietzsche.
We got close enough. Close enough. I was thinking more Hegel, but close enough. All right, Professor. Well, I think we've covered pretty good ground up to this point. At this point, I'm just going to say, is there anything else that you would like to add? The floor is yours.
It's a big floor.
It's a plane of eminence. It's an infinite plane of eminence.
Discussions could go on seemingly endlessly, but we will spare listeners from that.
Well, Professor, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for the discussion today.
Thank you. Well, that was fun.
That was weird.
Why was that weird?